As an expert in recovering stolen and missing vehicles, I received a report about a luxury car lost deep in the deserts of Death Valley, California. Once I arrived at the site, I didn't find the car. Instead, I found what remained of its passengers, hung like hunting trophies on the branches of dead Joshua trees in a brutal way that defied the laws of nature. I soon realized that I had entered a hunting ground belonging to a family of humans who had abandoned their humanity generations ago. People who don't kill for money, but for the feast. Now I have to survive a full night in this desolate hell, while these hunters, who know every stone and every drop of blood in this valley, track me down. Everything started with that cursed phone call at 3 in the morning, a time when only death or disaster arrives. I felt the caller's voice was strange. It wasn't just technical interference. The tone was stony, dry, as if the speaker hadn't used his vocal cords in years. He told me, in brief and cold words, that an SUV carrying a group of foreigners who had lost their way had completely vanished deep within the dead coordinates of Death Valley. He didn't call the police, he called me, claiming that the tracking system wouldn't respond to anyone but recovery experts like me. What truly terrified me wasn't the missing person report, but the sound of his breathing. It sounded like a faint, raspy whistling, like the call of a bird of prey. I didn't know then that those foreigners hadn't just lost their way, they had been harvested with precision, and that call wasn't a cry for help, it was a formal invitation to a bloody banquet, and I was the main course.
The scent of that place is still stuck in my nostrils, a sickening mixture of the metallic tang of fresh blood and the decay of human flesh. I used to think my work recovering missing cars was just a game of cat and mouse with professional criminals, but that night in Death Valley changed my definition of hell forever. I reached the coordinates the owner of the luxury car had sent me. It was a completely isolated spot where the rocky hills curved to form a natural funnel that absorbed the wind, replacing it with an eerie silence that made you hear your own heartbeat racing in your ears. I turned off my truck's engine and stepped out into the stifling heat that made the air dance before my eyes like a mirage. The missing car wasn't there, but something else was waiting for me. I looked up, and my blood froze. The twisted, dead Joshua trees looked like tangled human arms. What was hanging on them weren't branches, they were corpses. 4 people, their insides pulled out, their bodies pinned in a brutal, geometric fashion to the thorny limbs. The skin had been peeled away with the precision of a deranged surgeon. The bones were exposed, gleaming under the sun like a hellish work of art. I approached with trembling steps, my hand gripping the pistol at my side, even though I knew deep down that this weapon was just a piece of useless metal against whoever committed these atrocities. Suddenly, I heard a soft sound. It wasn't the wind, it was a wet sound, like a blade piercing raw meat behind a large rock a few meters away. I froze in place. My breath was trapped in my throat. As I tried to step back, my foot slipped on something hard. I looked down. It wasn't stone. It was a pile of human skulls, stacked with precision, some still dripping with a dark, viscous fluid. In that moment, I knew I was no longer the recovery expert. I had turned into the prey in a single second. A sharp, familiar, and annoying whistling sound broke out, echoing between the rocky hills from 3 different directions. It wasn't a natural human whistle, but the sound of someone trying to mimic a bird of prey, but in a harsh, stony tone. Then they appeared. They didn't come out of caves. They emerged from behind rocks I had thought were solid. They were human, or what looked like humans. Their skin was stained with a paste of mud and dried blood. They wore masks made from the fur of strange animals and human skin that still bore marks of its former identity. They started moving toward me, not running, but with swaying movements like a predator enjoying a slow kill. One of them, the largest of the three, raised something in his hand. It was a human jawbone attached to the end of a wooden stick. He started tapping it against the rock, a rhythmic beat that sped up with every step he took toward me. A severe chill ran down my spine. I knew then that they didn't want to kill me quickly. They wanted to draw it out. They wanted to see how I would wither under the weight of fear, how I would turn from a man with a gun into a piece of meat screaming before being hung on those cursed trees.
I had no choice but to run. I took off at the fastest speed my legs could carry me, breaking through the barrier of fear that had paralyzed my muscles. Behind me, I didn't hear screaming. I heard that constant whistling mixed with the sound of hooves hitting the ground with force, as if they possessed a superhuman ability to track me over this rugged terrain. I stumbled in the deep sands of the valley. I fell hard, twisting my ankle, and a muffled scream of pain escaped me, only to disappear into the hollow of the harsh desert. I looked back. They had stopped. They weren't far, standing like deformed stone statues under the glare of the sun, which was nearing dawn, casting a pale, deathly light over the sky. They didn't rush me. Instead, they began to spread out into a crescent, slowly surrounding me as if they were guiding a herd toward the altar. I tried to get up. I crawled behind a large, smooth rock, feeling my side, and pulled out my pistol. Those 6 rounds were my only hope, but my hand was shaking violently. Suddenly, a total silence took over. Even the wind stopped. I smelled a foul odor, not the smell of death this time, but the smell of meat being roasted over a low fire. I looked around the edge of the rock, and I saw one of them driving a rusty knife into the ground. Then he started digging. He wasn't looking for something lost. He was setting a trap, a thin, almost invisible wire stretching between 2 rocks, covered in sharp iron barbs smeared with a sticky substance. I realized then that I wasn't facing simple murderers. I was facing hunters who had lived here for centuries, mastering the art of torturing prey and guiding it toward its inevitable fate. The darkness began to lift slowly. In the world of Death Valley, darkness isn't just the absence of light. It's an entity that wraps around you to choke you. I heard a harsh sound right behind my ear, a sound coming from a human throat, but distorted, as if the owner had lost the ability to speak decades ago. I remembered the same voice that had called me about the missing car. He was saying something in an ineligible language, a mix of animal whines and snake hisses. I turned quickly and fired a random shot into the air. The bullet hit nothing, but the sound boomed like an explosion in the absolute silence. I saw a huge shadow vanishing behind the rocks, leaving behind a trail of blood on the sand. I had signaled my location, but I had also revealed that I was armed. They began to laugh, an intermittent laugh that sounded like bones breaking underfoot. I gathered my courage and started moving against the wind, trying to take advantage of the darkness that had begun to fade. While I was sneaking away, I caught a glimpse of something from afar that made my heart stop. It was a knife hanging in the air directly in front of my face. I stopped at the last second. There was a net of sharp wires hidden in my path, designed to tear anyone trying to escape. I looked up, and my whole body shook. Those trees weren't just for hanging. They were part of a monitoring system. They had been watching me from above, from atop those towering rocks, guiding me like a mouse in a maze, enjoying every drop of sweat that fell from me. Suddenly, I felt a sharp prick in my back. A small, poison-tipped arrow had pierced my clothes. I felt my body begin to lose control, while the 3 ghosts appeared from every corner, advancing toward me with heavy, confident steps, as if they knew I couldn't even manage a farewell scream.
They didn't let me slip into full unconsciousness. That was their malicious strategy, to keep me aware of every atom of pain tearing through my body. After the poisoned arrow pierced my back, I felt the cold liquid slipping into my veins, paralyzing my limbs but keeping my senses on high alert. I felt rough hands, like the bark of an ancient tree, gripping my ankles. The dragging began. They pulled me over the rough desert sand, my face smashing into small stones that tore at my skin with every meter they covered. I could hear the grinding of my bones as they hit the rocks, and the sound of their heavy, steady breathing behind me, as if they were dragging game they had finally caught after a long struggle. The terrain began to change. I felt the air grow cold when they pulled me into a narrow opening in the mountain, where the smell of dust was replaced by a pungent odor of death and clotted blood. The sound of my body dragging along the ground inside the narrow rocky tunnel made a terrifying echo, and with every impact of my head against sharp protrusions, sparks of pain illuminated the darkness of my vision, until they finally threw me into a vast hall reeking of human barbecue. There, in the heart of the mountain, logic began to collapse before my eyes. I wasn't dreaming. The pain was all too real. I felt the sting of rough ropes wrapping around my wrists and ankles, pressing into my open wounds to tie me to a solid wooden pillar in the middle of the cave. Fires were rising from a massive hearth, casting distorted shadows of skeletons hanging from the ceiling. They weren't animal carcasses, they were human remains, stripped of their flesh with surgical precision, hanging like silent bells in the gentle breeze. The elder appeared from among the shadows, stepping slowly over a floor carpeted with a thick layer of human hair and crushed bone. He approached me, and his features held not a shred of hatred. Instead, he looked at me with chilling gratitude, as if I were a gift from heaven to satisfy his family's hunger. He raised his bone knife, and I felt the coldness of its blade as it slowly sliced through my shirt, touching my trembling skin, while the followers began beating 2 human skulls against the edges of massive metal pots, announcing the start of the preparation ceremony. The rhythm of the tapping increased, and the elder began to drive the knife blade slightly deep into my shoulder, collecting the first drops of my blood into an old wooden bowl, then sipping it slowly while closing his eyes in sickening ecstasy. In that moment, I saw something behind him that shattered what was left of my will. I saw my wallet and my broken phone lying on a pile of belongings from previous victims. There was a car key that matched perfectly with the key to my wife's car, the one who had disappeared on a business trip 2 years ago and was never found. I screamed with all my might, but my voice came out as a death rattle, while the elder leaned toward my ear and whispered in a voice dripping with blood, "Blood doesn't lie. Your taste reminds me of her." Tears froze in my eyes as I saw one of them approaching with a white-hot iron ladle, heading toward my leg to begin the cauterization process before the dismemberment. The end was approaching, and the knives were being sharpened to the rhythm of my muffled screams, while the light of dawn began to creep weakly through a hole in the cave ceiling, not to announce rescue, but to reveal to me the hundreds of hungry eyes starting to emerge from the crevices in the walls, waiting for their turn in the feast that would never end.